Good Oslo morning to everyone. Wonderful to see you here, and blessings for the day. Welcome to this parallel session on the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, which has this mysterious subtitle, An Opportunity to Preach Beyond the Choir. We'll see if we are beyond the choir here. We are honored that you have chosen to join us for this important session. And we are excited to be here at the Oslo Tropical Forest Forum to provide a briefing on this emerging alliance that is working to bring the political, social, moral, and spiritual influence of religious leaders and faith communities to bear on efforts to protect the world's tropical forests. Almost exactly a year ago, I had the pleasure to participate in the launch here in Oslo of the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative at the Nobel Peace Center, where it belongs. We came together for a first of its kind summit. Christians, Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu, and Taoist religious leaders joining forces with indigenous peoples from Brazil, Colombia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Indonesia, Mesoamerica, and Peru. We came together to make the protection of rainforests an ethical priority for the world faith communities. And we emerged with a commitment to form a multi-faith alliance dedicated to protecting rainforests and, importantly, protecting the protectors, the indigenous peoples and forest communities that have historically been the best guardians of rainforests and who continue to put their lives on the line every day to defend them. I know we are joined by several of the religious leaders that participated in that meeting a year ago. We know that you are here in the audience, so I just wanted to recognize you and say that we continue to be in this together. Allow me briefly to outline the vision and objectives of the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative. Today, more than ever before, the ethical dimensions of environmental destruction are part of the global debate. And we know that faith is fundamental to the majority of people in the world. And we also know that the world's remaining rainforests are indeed critical for life on Earth. What we are doing with this initiative is bringing these two dimensions, these two insights together, reflecting on, developing, and conveying the spiritual, ethical, and religious case for saving one of the planet's richest ecosystems, an iconic part of creation, and indeed a symbol of life itself, the tree of life, the life of the tree. The Interfaith Rainforest Initiative is being developed as an international multi-faith partnership. It is a shared platform for all the world's religions. The initiative has a global focus so far in 5 major rainforest countries: Brazil, Colombia, Democratic Republic of Congo, Indonesia, and Peru. And here are some key objectives: build consensus, facilitate interfaith dialogue to build solidarity across religions and faiths, make the case, provide a shared platform for leaders from religion, science, and forest communities, facilitate learning, equip religious and spiritual leaders with the science, information, and tools they need to become advocates for protecting rainforests, and mobilize commitments, spiritual leaders to make rainforest protection an ethical priority, governments and companies to account for their commitments to the laws, agreed goals, and policy frameworks, keep everyone honest. In other words, inspire action, raise awareness, influence policy, build new coalitions, and not least, celebrate creation with artists, musicians, performance to celebrate the beauty, majesty, and divine inspiration that rainforests provide. My personal perspective is the following: different faiths, common action. But also the painful admission, we are speaking of religion for better and worse. We are aligning religion to reality, and we are inspiring reality to take religion seriously. Religion has a different language of love, of conversion, of forgiveness, of truth and justice. But there is a common sense of spirituality. And in that common sense of spirituality, we will now move forward. So let me introduce the panelists. They are here in the front row, and as I call your name and introduce you, please find your seat up here. Distinguished speakers are here today to share more about the initiative and its potential. Erik Solheim, Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, which is a lead implementing agency for the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative. He served as Norway's Minister of the Environment and International Development. He initiated the Nature Diversity Act, one of the most important environmental legislations in Norway. And under his leadership, the Norwegian Climate and Forest Initiative was established. He has chaired the Development Assistance Committee of OECD. Erik, we are very fortunate to have you with us for the first hour, I understand. Then he will be delivering remarks and participate in other programs. And Charles McNeil, his good supporter and staff leader, will then take his seat. Then I invite Josien Aloema-Tokoe from Suriname. She is the area coordinator, Women and Family, of the Climate Alliance and organizations of the indigenous people of the Amazonas. Thank you for coming this long distance to share with us your indigenous and your shaman spiritual perspective and lifting up the importance of women and family in this context. Then I invite Dr. Dean Syamsuddin, a professor of Islamic political thought at the National Islamic University of Jakarta. He has been the leader of one of Indonesia's largest Muslim organizations, the Muhammadiyah, and chairman of the Advisory Council of the Indonesian Council of Ulama. He is currently serving as Special Envoy of the President of the Republic of Indonesia for Special Envoy for Interfaith and Intercivilizational Dialogue and Cooperation, and he is a co-president of Religions for Peace. Mauricio Lopez Oropeza, Executive Director of the Pan-Amazonian Eclesial Network, REPAM, and Executive Secretary of Caritas Ecuador. He is also one of the 18 members assisting Pope Francis with the 2019 Synod of Bishops, which is devoted to Amazonia, new pathways for the Church and for an integral ecology. And then Fletcher Harper, who is an Episcopal priest and Executive Director of GreenFaith, which is an interfaith organization that is one of the leading partners on the implementation of the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative. And he has been active also visiting some of the country programs and is a member of the Global Steering Committee. His book, Mobilizing God's People to Protect the Planet, is a must. And what a panel we have. And we may be joined later by the UN Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Vicky Tauli-Corpus. Let me apologize in advance to our panelists, since time is tight, I may, as other chairpersons before me, occasionally, politely, I hope, interject to keep us on track. And now to the questions for the panelists. Erik, Solheim, from the perspective of the United Nations, what can religious leaders and faith-based communities uniquely bring to multi-stakeholder action on forests? What gaps do the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative fill in this regard?
Let me start by sharing one experience with you from another sector than rainforest, but it illustrates your point. I was 3 weeks back in India for World Environment Day with Prime Minister Modi and other political leaders setting out the issue of how to defeat the plastic pollution. And this was an issue 2 years back no one talked about in the world. It's come like that to the top of the environment agenda everywhere. And Prime Minister Modi made the enormously brave promise that India will phase out one-use plastic by 2022. When you think of that, if India can do it, every other nation in the world can do it, because India is much more complicated than the United States, and not to speak about Norway or Suriname. It's the most complicated place. By 2022, also by far the most populous country on planet Earth, passing China next year or the year after. So it can happen in India, it can happen everywhere. But this is related to your question, because in the build-up of popular opinion, because when Prime Minister Modi did this, it was popular. People like it. They think it's the right thing to do. That comes from Bollywood stars. It comes from cricket players. It comes from every aspect of society, from civil society. But a very powerful, important force were Hindu leaders. Also Muslim and Christian leaders, but of course the Hindu leaders are the most prominent in India. We had a morning session at 7 o'clock in Delhi with Sadhguru, one of the most important Hindu leaders of India. Thousands of people around at 7 o'clock in the morning. Gunnar, we would have difficulties mobilizing thousands of people in Oslo at 7 o'clock in the morning for whatever.
No problem, no problem.
Oh, you can do it. I cannot do it, but if you come, maybe. In the afternoon, the same day, we were with Sri Ravi Shankar, another critical Hindu leader. Again, thousands of people around. But I mean, I noticed that when I met with Sri Ravi Shankar in his ashram in Bangalore earlier this year, that was the most circulated tweet I made in my life. Maybe if I'm able to meet Donald Trump, there will be more tweets. But for non-political leader, and I can be proud to say I met quite a few prime ministers and presidents and leaders of all sorts, but nothing has been circulated like a meeting with Sri Ravi Shankar, where we spoke about the spiritual dimensions on environmental issues. So what it shows to me is the enormous importance of this dimension. We need, if we want to protect the forest, also to bring in the economic dimension for sure. We need the private sector, we need economists, we need to make the case to people in the Amazon that they can have a better life, make more money, get out of poverty through other economic means. So there are many dimensions to this, but one of the strongest is the moral, ethical dimension, which can be set out by church leaders, religious leaders of different sorts. And I think there are two main reasons why religious leaders are so important. Number one is the moral leadership. People tend to believe in leaders of religions much more than many others. They look up to them, they believe they can tell us the way. And deep down, the reason why many people are engaged with the environment is because it comes out of the religious feeling. And you are a better expert on the Bible than me, Gunnar, but the Bible starts and ends with the environment. God is creating the world in the Bible, I mean, creating the space, creating the waters, the land, the animals, and at the end of the day, the human being, and he's very, very proud of himself. On the seventh day, he take a rest because he's so proud looking out of this beautiful, beautiful planet and universe he has created. And the Bible ends with the environment, where the Apostle John, sitting at a Greek island, having a big vision of a river. So the Bible starts and ends with the environment. But of course, if you look to the Quran, or to Hindu text, or to basically every religion, there's a huge environment component. Every religion tells us to care for Mother Earth. So that moral, spiritual dimension is so important. Some people in very secular societies like Norway may not understand it, but for most people in the world, comes right from the heart, from the feelings, from the body. It's so central. But the other is also a practical one. The religious organizations are amongst those organizations in the world with the best network, most grassroots activities. In Indonesia, there are very, very few organizations with the outreach. I mean, most Norwegians may not know these broad Islamic organizations in Indonesia, but they have network everywhere in this vast, vast country. If you move to Africa, yes, in nearly all capitals in Africa, you will find a few civil society organizations of Western type, but normally they have no network in the country. The network in Africa is nearly always Christian or Islamic, depending on the country. In some countries both, in some either of them. But they are the grassroots. I don't think I've ever been to a village in Africa where there was neither a mosque nor a church. There is everywhere. So if you want to reach out beyond the group of intellectuals in the capitals, there is no network more important than the religious networks. So these are, for me, the two main reasons: to tap into the moral leadership, the deep feelings coming from religions, and make people enthusiastic, inspired to protect Mother Earth, and to tap into the vast, vast networks beyond the capitals of the world into the deep into society.
Thank you. This is very important for us to hear from one of the top leaders of the United Nations, to affirm the ethical, spiritual, and operational contribution from communities of faith. Thank you, Erik. We'll come back in the second round. Fletcher, Harper, could I ask you, what does successful faith-based mobilization on forest and RED Plus look like at the national and global level? You have visited programs in Brazil, Colombia, and Peru. Could you try to concretize this, what we heard from Erik, in actually what happens on the ground?
Certainly, and I think we can do it in two ways. One is historical, and the other is looking forward. So historically, very recently, in the lead up, for example, to COP21, we saw religious groups around the world mobilize and make their support for a strong climate agreement felt in a number of ways. And I'll list just a few of those. There were extensive educational efforts undertaken in religious communities around the world to raise awareness about the issue and to start to explain the moral and the practical basis for strong climate agreements and strong climate legislation, framed in a moral and ethical context, but also at a very practical level. There were petitions, there were advocacy efforts that were initiated in countries around the world where religious leaders went and visited elected officials or government officials and made it very clear that they felt that it was the right thing to do and the necessary thing to do for these leaders to step up and to support a strong agreement in Paris. Religious groups played a central leadership role in the fossil fuel divestment movement globally. And were and still are the most numerous, by number, the most numerous institutions in the world, aligning their investments with their values and making a very strong public statement about climate change in that regard. And then we had religious leaders, and the best well-known is Pope Francis with Laudato Si', but as Dr. Dim knows, there was a landmark global Islamic declaration on climate change that was issued the August before the Paris Agreement. There were strong public statements issued by Buddhist and Hindu and Jewish leaders as well. And so you see the religious community stepping forward and using their public moral voice in that kind of way. So when we look at how can religious groups make a contribution in relationship to rainforests, it's in a similar way. First, there has to be education for these leaders and their communities so that they are aware of the issues and so they know how to frame them in the passionate moral ways that these issues deserve to be framed. There will be advocacy opportunities for religious leaders to meet with and to make their views very clearly known to religious and corporate leaders on these issues. These corporate and governmental leaders will not have heard from the religious sector yet on this, and it's vital that they do so. As an example, just the very recent election results in Colombia. One of the things that we hope to do is to bring forth a declaration in Colombia so that that new government, as it is forming, hears from multi-faith religious leaders that they believe very strongly that the forests and indigenous communities and their rights must be protected as a matter of a moral imperative. We need religious leaders, and we have opportunities for religious leaders then to speak out publicly, to do back-channel advocacy, but also to speak out publicly, to issue op-eds, to have sermons, fatwas, Devar Torahs, Friday prayer, Jummah at the Friday Jummah prayer services, for religious leaders around these countries to be speaking out and helping shift the culture. And then finally, religious investors have opportunities to start to advocate at the shareholder advocacy level for companies to be changing the ways in which they do business, to be more protective of forests and of indigenous people's rights. So there are an array of ways that religious groups can and must mobilize their resources, and I think that full court press, if you will, is what success looks like.
Thank you, thank you. Josien, where do you think this initiative can have the greatest impact for indigenous peoples and forest communities? And what is your spiritual shaman perspective on this?
Yeah, it's a question. And, I grew up with my grandparents. My grandfather, he was a shaman. I learned a lot of him about the shaman, the forest, to protect the forest with our spiritual. And he teach me, because I was question a lot of things about him, about the way of life, how and what, and from the, so as we know, the colonialism came and destroyed our culture, tradition, but he learned me that I have to be strong, learn my culture, my language, because that is my identity. Learn the song, because the song is one of the important things to sing for the forest, the birds, everything that is in the forest. They have the life, because he teach me that nobody has to say that they see God, how God look like. But there is a spirit, the creator. You call it creator. You have to be clean. You have to be, your heart to be open. You have to be happy. Sometimes you have sadness, but you have to cry. You have to dream, because the dream is the future. Without your dream, you cannot be a human being that has go forward, because the dream has to bring you forward. And to take a leaf of the tree, you have to ask before you break this. You have to pray, because they have also their life. He told me, for the healing of you, you have to pray and say, I need you. I need you to heal me, to heal my children. Everything that is in the forest has a life. And now, in Suriname, we create a lot of the religion coming together, because we learn also to respect each other religion. The one of the other, they are praying the same God, for example, God. Yeah, who is God? But the spirit, give you healing, give you this perspective to see the way of life. And use all of the three, and that is one of the things that I have to say, the concession in the, from the government. And now we give the weakness. If you give the concession to the companies, what happened? Because we need the tree. For example, we need the leaves of the takini tree that is important for the shaman, because they are drinking the juice of this. To become shaman, it's not like today I say yes, tomorrow I'm a shaman. But you have to be clear in this. You have to be, how I can say that you have clean your mind also, because it's a heavy duty to do this, because it's one of the that you have to come from poisoning like that.
Thank you, Josien. We'll come back to the women and family perspective. Erik, thank you for interpreting the shaman dimension, which we need to listen to very carefully. Thank you for that. May I now ask Mauricio, what has your organization, REPAM, experienced with faith-based mobilization in the Amazon and other regions? Could you give us some very concrete examples that sort of fills in the comments we've heard up to now?
Thank you very much. I'd like to draw some general elements which might not be only for the Amazon, but for a general reflection on the need for spirituality, for the radical change that we need today. Radical meaning going to the root. I like to quote Pierre Teilhard of the Chardin to start this conversation. He said, "We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." That changes everything. The connection with our belonging to the soil needs to be there. And I know this is a peripheral parallel event. The discussions are going in another direction, so we need to bring the spiritual reflection into the core of the matter. Otherwise, I think our future is going to be seriously at risk. So I'd like to offer you a triple tripod. In a tripod, if you take away one of the legs, everything falls down. So the first one, I'd like to offer some of the values needed to change as society today. First one being gratuity, reciprocity. We've lost the capacity to give free what we have received freely. And we have merchandised our whole conception of nature and our relation with one another. And I think the spiritual tools need to help us change that. Not immediately, not drastically, but little by little. The second one is synodality. We're going through a process of a synod in the Amazon, and I think synodality is also a key element for all spiritual traditions to come together, to converge as drops of water, small drops of water which come together and converge in the big river. Otherwise, if we do it by ourselves, we'll fail, definitely fail. The third element of the first tripod is territoriality. We need to seriously pay attention and listen to what's happening down there. We need to listen to the voices of those who are there, not only to offer some recognition, but to embrace what they're all about and their true being. The second tripod that I want to offer is the urgent appeals. They're not negotiable. The first one is inequality. We have failed as societies when we see a world when we have 1% of the population holding 99% of the riches. We have failed as society. There's nothing we can do to protect forests if we don't really tackle that situation. 8 persons in this planet hold the same amount of riches of half of the population, the poorest population of this world. The spirituality approach needs to come in there and try to change any initiative that we do, and which is, of course, we need to applaud that, will not be able to change. And the rainforests have no future if we don't tackle the inequality situation. The second one, the violation of human rights. We working directly with the territories, we see that happening every day in, day out. People from the faith traditions, but especially the indigenous communities, being murdered every day, and we remain silent. Some try to speak, but we are focused on other elements, and I think we need to respond to that. I think the ethical approach that we were talking about really goes down to what do we do and we say when people are being murdered every day, being kicked out of their territories and really taken away from their own identities. And the second one is to overcome this functional approach, the face washing on the protection of forests. We need to be coherent and recognize the mystery of life kept in those places. And of course, we need to offer some economical alternatives, but it needs to come from that recognition of the beauty of it. And the third tripod, three very strange words that I want to offer to you. First one, metanoia, a radical conversion of the heart. If we don't change inside, nothing we can do, forums, conference will be enough. And I think the indigenous people can help us change our hearts. Metanoia. The second one, alterity, the otherness. We need to recognize that our future, our life, goes along with one another. And the third one, to finish, parresia. It's a courageous going out, not just speaking, but really going out there and responding to the cries of the people and the mystery of love, life, and spirituality which lies down there.
Thank you so much. In this first round, the last speaker is Dr. Syamsuddin. What do you see as the key challenges and opportunities in interfaith action regarding forest in Indonesia?
I'd like to emphasize more on the opportunities, though in our backdrop is for unity rather than challenges, because challenges are always there, everywhere and everywhere, including in Indonesia as one of the biggest land of the world. Of course, we have been facing great challenges of forest burning and illegal logging and others, both for business motive or as traditional activities by the people. And Indonesia is seen as exporter of haze to neighboring countries almost every year, especially during summer and dry seasons. But thanks God that the nation, both government and the people, have a great concern, especially Indonesia have religions which are deeply rooted in the life of the people, and all religions in Indonesia have great concern and have been preaching not only for the environmental conservation, but we began to use new term as through the Indonesian Ulama Council, respecting, to respect the nature, memuliakan lingkungan hidup, more than to conserve. Because we do believe that the nature has his own soul and psyche, so that need to be respected. So this great new concern about nature is not as an object, but more as subject. In Islam, nature, tabi'ah, is more than natura naturatan, but it's more as natura naturata, as a subject. Because tabi'ah is subject, not matbu is an object. So this kind of theology and religious understanding is there, and this is a great opportunity for us in Indonesia. And then maybe in the second round, I would like to share our experience on the real multi-faith collaboration to respect the nature through multi-faith action. But this great opportunity has been also supported by the government. And this, I think, new element in our national life, and therefore we are optimistic in the future for the environmental conservation, environmental respect by, creating new culture new consciousness among the people, both the government as well as the community, especially religious communities.
Thank you. If we speak about the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, the term initiative indicates that this is a never-ending process. We will be there with the dynamics from the beginning all the way. But we also relate not only interfaith and intrafaith, but also to politicians, industry, business, and to academics, scientists. How do you experience this encounter between sort of a faith-based spiritual perception of reality of the world in a dialogue with those who actually sit there with the knowledge, the academicians, the politicians who sit there with the power, and the industry and business who sit there with the money? What does it look like in real terms, in a real day, of forwarding the protection of rainforests in this perspective? Erik, would you like to have a take on that?
I have a very, very simple theory of change. It was basically inspired by Barack Obama when I listened to him a few months before he left office as the President of the United States. He basically said that my two young daughters, when I speak to them about acid rain, they look somewhere else. I mean, they will start looking into the magazines or on TV somewhere else, but they couldn't care less. Why is that, he said? Well, because the problem is resolved. Acid rain, by the way, was the most important environment problem in the United States of America when a young Barack Obama became a politician. The problem is gone, it's resolved. How was it resolved? And that's the theory of change. It was resolved because there was a strong citizens' movement demanding change. There was brave politicians, many of them from the Republican Party even, regulating the market and making the right political decisions. And there was a business community coming up with all the alternative products, the technology we needed for change. And I believe that nearly all the major challenges humanity are facing will have to be resolved by these three coming together. Without citizens pushing change, nothing happening. But without brave politicians leading, we are in deep trouble. And without business, we are also in trouble. And of course, the religious component is strong on all these three because many business leaders and political leaders have a strong faith. I spoke about Prime Minister Modi of India. Well, he's also leading one of the, in reality, broadest religious movements in India, the Hindu or Hindivata tendency with many, many different religious organizations. He's not a recognized formal leader of that, but in reality is leading that movement. So he comes with a strong religious component. But of course on the citizens' part, it's even more true. There is no way we can bring citizens on board without this. There are challenges. Of course, you will find some scientists, as you indicate, who believe God has no role in the science. You will find some religious leaders who deny science. But by and large, the big political religions of the world, Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism, Buddhism, has made peace with science. Believing science is also coming from God. And without science, we cannot solve any problem. And that there is no contradiction between believing in science and having the spiritual dimension. So why it's not a plain, easy way forward, still I believe we can bring all these three together, and the citizen religious component, the political and the business component.
We often speak about keeping authorities and people in power honest. But sometimes I feel we need to turn this question about honesty to the religious communities themselves in addressing these issues. What about the situation where you find the resistance to climate mission to come from religious communities rather than from those I've mentioned? Anyone who wants to take on that? Yes, Josien.
Nowadays, the spiritual people in the communities, there's a big question for us. For example, in my community, there's only 2 left because there's no, the youth is not take this over because it's a lot of, yeah, you have to live a lot of way of life from the youth. You have to go in this way, like other. You have to live other way of life in this shamanism. But we talk with the Minister of Education and Culture to bring this back. Why? Because we need that in everything that also in the communities, because where is the spirit of the indigenous people? We have, but we need this people. We have to unite them back. That is in the Amazon basin. For example, in Brazil, we have them. When we unite them, that they are come together and give the youth this the lesson, train them, because you have to. It's like the university. You have to learn the songs. It's not that you can sing the song like how you want to, but you need that the smoke, the cigar. It's not that every day that you smoke, but they have their the spiritual of all of these issues. I think from here that we can make from COICA, that we bring all of this, because we have also a new board members, and you have also the youth that is here and that know also about that we lost all of this issue, that bring it back to our, because we need that for example, to protect our territory from the government, from all of what the impact that is coming to our communities.
Yeah. You wanted to join on that?
Yeah, I think there are 2 ways in which we have to talk about the importance of honesty for and within religious communities with this issue. And I think, to follow what Josien said, the first is that we all know that there is a long and very complicated history between religious communities, particularly Christianity, and indigenous communities. And we simply must acknowledge that. I think that one of the things that I have been very encouraged about in this initiative so far, and we saw it in Oslo at the gathering last year, and we've seen it on the ground in the meetings that we've had in Peru and Colombia and Brazil, is that on the part of religious leaders, there is a genuine recognition of that history, a willingness to listen, and a desire to learn from and commit to protect the protectors. That process will take time, and trust needs to be built one step at a time, but it is a significant step forward. In most of the rest of the religious environmental movement, there has not been this honest encounter and engagement with indigenous communities. And so I think that's one piece that I've been very grateful for, and that I know I look forward to continuing to learn how to serve the interests of the indigenous communities. I think the second piece is what happens when you have religious communities, as you said, Gunnar, who either deny climate change or who act in a manner that is not favorable to the protection of rainforests. And I think there are 2 ways that we can engage. One is an honest dialogue. Sometimes those challenges are because the environmental or forest protection concerns are being viewed as culturally inconsistent with a more traditional religious worldview. And very often there, the issue is, how do you find the right messengers? We met in Colombia with leaders of the evangelical community there who offered to work with us to develop educational resources, biblically based educational resources, to engage evangelical communities in Colombia and beyond, to help frame these issues from an evangelical, biblically based perspective. That will be the message that will penetrate within those communities. And so we need to find those partnerships. But then there will also, and we know that there is still ongoing missionary activity by certain religious, again, often Christian missionaries, that is still aimed at converting and being very sort of negative towards indigenous cultures. And this initiative is not part of that. And I think we need to be very, very clear about that. That we stand for the respect for indigenous communities and for their traditions. We stand for the respect for science and its findings. And we believe that there is an enormous religious audience that is ready for that message and that is ready to move into action in that regard.
Yes, and of course, one of the challenges, even the elephant in the room, is corruption. And if religion is a conveyor of, or a custodian of truth and justice before reconciliation, then how do you see in this context of the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, that we also address honestly and straightforwardly the issue of corruption? Would you, Dean Syamsuddin, address that?
Yeah, it's true that one of the great challenges from the side of the religious communities, especially in Indonesia, as far as I know it, is that the misunderstanding of religious message with regard to the conservation. As for example, maybe in other countries as well, that the perception on river, for example, is not a source of life, but more as final destination where we can throw everything. So these great challenges for religious preaching, how to change their mindset. And the other thing is that perception that the destruction, environmental destruction, is derived from the act of the business people. So they have the responsibility, and the government to take any concrete measure. It's not our responsibility. But then we emphasize very much on the religious mission that we are sent by God as vicegerents of God on earth in Islamic perspective, so that we took the initiative. Especially we understand that all religions share commonalities with regard to the environmental conservation and respect, especially the three Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So that, for example, we see it possible, and indeed we have created in the year 2014 the real multi-faith collaboration on environmental action through the creation in Indonesian term, Indonesia bergerak untuk menyelamatkan bumi. Indonesia moves to serve the earth, with the acronym is Siaga Bumi, our movement. Literally means Earth Alert. Dr. Pahran is there, is one of the activists. Is indeed multi-faith collaboration. I think I'm a chairman of the steering committee of this movement. I think during the last 2 years, we have been working to, we call it eco house of worship, eco mosque, eco church, vihara, temple, and others. How to make greenization of the surrounding of the house of worship, regarding sanitation, garbage management, and hopefully in the next year we are going to launch the movement for the clean river. So based on religious perspective,
yeah.
this is multi-faith collaboration.
And this connects well with the examples that Erik Solheim was giving from his visit to India. May I now...
May I just tell you that
yes.
Indonesia, they even sent in the army to clean up some of the rivers, and I really took notice of what the general who was given this task, he said. I mean, they were asked, is this a natural enemy of Indonesia? He said, yes, this is the real enemy of Indonesia. So that's why we are using the army to fight this enemy, which was some of the really polluted rivers in Java. So this is spot on.
Excellent. We have two participants in the audience who could share with us briefly, sort of in a very short statement, Pastor Ariovaldo Ramos dos Santos, President of World Vision from Brazil, and Monsignor Alfredo Vizcarra, Bishop Apostolic Vicariate of Jaén, President of CAP. Would you just say a few words, Pastor Ariovaldo? Is there a mic available? Yeah, there you are. Good. Just briefly, to hear your voice and your message.
I will speak in Portuguese because my English is not very well.
I will try to understand it from my limited Spanish.
Ok. No Brasil, a consciência da fé, principalmente entre os evangélicos, e a preservação ainda é incipiente, está começando. Estamos nos organizando aos poucos para participar desta consciência que é mundial. Durante anos, essa ênfase não esteve na pauta religiosa, principalmente dos evangélicos, no Brasil. E agora há esse novo despertar, esperamos poder contribuir com todo o mundo nessa busca pela recuperação do meio ambiente. Enfrentamos essa questão da corrupção, que o senhor mencionou. Tivemos agora um movimento no Brasil extremamente bancado pela corrupção, e a corrupção, obviamente, no Brasil não tem interesses de preservação do meio ambiente, muito pelo contrário. O grupo que assumiu o poder é um grupo que tem interesses na Amazônia e em outros biomas muito mais comerciais e muito menos preservacionais. Mas, como disse o Fletcher Harper, nós entendemos que a ação da fé pode ser um fator extremamente importante, inclusive na revisão dessa pauta, mesmo das empresas e mesmo dos políticos, por causa da pressão civil. E, por isso, entendemos, como disse o Maurício, que essa nossa luta contra a desigualdade e essa nossa luta pela ética pode trazer benefícios a médio prazo para a preservação do meio ambiente no Brasil, que é tão importante para nós quanto para o resto do mundo. Obrigado.
Obrigado, Barão. And we say thank you to Erik, who has to go to another mission. Thank you. And Charles has taken the hot seat. Monsignor Alfredo.
En primer lugar, quisiera agradecer por esta oportunidad. Creo que tenemos que felicitar a quienes organizan este encuentro, que hayan querido también incluir esta perspectiva, es decir, la perspectiva de la fe. Porque creo que, como lo dijo hace un momento Mauricio, no es un elemento secundario, sino que es muy importante para tener una visión o una dimensión completa, o las dimensiones completas de nuestro ser humano. Y bueno, quisiera simplemente también decir que desde la iniciativa del año pasado hemos estado dando algunos pasos también en el Perú. Y hemos tenido ya un encuentro con el Consejo Interreligioso de Perú para poder implementar también una oficina o un espacio interreligioso de tal manera que las diferentes confesiones que existen en el país podamos aunar nuestros esfuerzos y poder trabajar juntos por esta preservación de la Amazonía. Y claro, sabemos que cuando decimos la Amazonía no estamos diciendo solamente el cuidado de la naturaleza, sino que es toda esa biodiversidad o el ecosistema en el que hacemos parte. Es decir, para los pueblos indígenas aprendemos de eso de ellos, que en el ecosistema está el ser humano también, están las comunidades indígenas, ¿no? Y si tocamos alguna parte, alguna dimensión de la Amazonía, que puede ser los recursos o cualquier otra cosa de este ecosistema, también influimos sobre las personas, sobre las culturas que están allí y que se han desarrollado justamente gracias a ese medio ambiente, a ese entorno natural, y que por eso pues no podemos seccionar, ¿no? Y creo que es importante entonces que en esta actividad esté también la dimensión religiosa, la dimensión de la fe, porque es como el alma de todo lo que queremos hacer, es de todo lo que hacemos en nuestra vida. Y creo que la Amazonía refleja de alguna manera eso, porque para los pueblos indígenas no hay una separación entre la naturaleza, el río, el aire, en fin, todo, y el ser humano. Todo está interconectado, como le gusta decir al Papa Francisco. Y creo que eso ellos no necesitan que se los expliquemos, ellos lo viven, y esa es la riqueza que nosotros podemos tener, recibir de ellos, ¿no? Y en ese sentido me parece a mí, yo quisiera terminar ya simplemente añadiendo que creo que en estas iniciativas por el cuidado de la naturaleza, de las selvas tropicales, si la idea es que haya un diálogo, a mí me parece que tendría que haber un espacio mayor para una escucha de los pueblos indígenas. Hemos dicho varias veces, he escuchado aquí en estos 2 días que llevamos acá, que ellos son los verdaderos protectores de la Amazonía. Para que esto sea verdad, tendríamos que escucharlos más, tendríamos que darles un mayor espacio y quizás tener menos una actividad o una actitud protagonista, de proponerles a ellos cosas, de cómo tendría que ser, sino más bien también escuchar a ellos y juntos, sí, de verdad, desde una dimensión más de diálogo horizontal, poder definir qué cosas podríamos hacer para el cuidado real de la Amazonía. Muchas gracias.
Gracias. Before I open the floor to pose questions to the panel, we have a short video to share, a video which we received just today from a gathering at the Vatican under the title Ethics in Action. Ethics in Action. It's an ongoing program in the Pontifical Academy of Science. I have attended one of the sessions there. They have addressed the nuclear issue, they have addressed the migration issue, and in these days they are addressing the climate issue and the rainforest issue. So they are sharing with us a greeting, which we'll see now, and then I'll open the floor for comments.
It's also auspicious that while we meet, there's another important meeting taking place in Oslo, and I want to also say hello on behalf of all of us, all of the indigenous leaders here and the religious leaders and the members of Ethics in Action, to the Oslo Tropical Forest Forum. So we will have an interchange of ideas, and we greet you from this wondrous Casina Pio Quattro, the home of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, and we very much look forward to hearing from you, from Oslo, the lessons of your deliberations and the great work, in particular the Interfaith Forest Initiative, which is a core part of the Oslo Tropical Forest Forum. So thank you very much, and to Oslo we look forward to our great collaboration together.
Thank you. This was Professor Jeffrey Sachs, as most of you will have seen. We now have about 25 minutes, and I'd like us to continue the conversation now with participation from the floor. You have listened carefully. You will certainly have missed certain points of your agenda, perhaps not being addressed. This is a time to bring it up, or to sharpen the issue beyond what we have been able to do in our conversation so far. Please, when you speak, identify yourself and be brief and to the point. Please, who is?
That's a question.
Yeah, and we'll see the.
Yeah, maybe I would like just to bring the point of Africa, because we didn't talk about Africa. I'm representing the Congo Basin network, for the Eclesial network, and it is in 6 countries. And I wanted to share from our theology, from how can we justify the involvement today of especially the Christian church on this matter. In the tradition, everywhere, you will see churches, they have their temples. What are the temples for the people of Africa? It was forests. So for us, the link between the question of protecting forests and our faith is not something very new. And just to give an example, you know that in a traditional religion in Africa, the initiation was done in the forests. The forest was the place of prayer. So from the point of view for African theologians, we build our message from cosmology, the way we understand the world, anthropology, the role of the human being in the society, ethnology, the understanding of the culture, and the theology. It is important to point that, because we are, as the network today, trying to push that agenda. I think it will be helpful to share that with all the people working on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was important. We have a question sent by the, what are the concrete steps taken now in the regions on following up on Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, and what is the key entry points to succeed? That is a good question to the panel, and with this question we are actually moving down to, or up to, the concrete level of activity. And I'm also happy that Charles McNeil has joined us now. He is the hands-on man, the inspiration and the director together with his good team, and I think we should give him a hand now for all the good work they are doing. So, who would like to start on this one? Mauricio.
Well, I'd like to thank the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative. Just as I pointed out the urgency of coming together, at the same time and with the same importance, we have this type of initiatives bringing us together. They are crucial. They are crucial for us in the Amazon region. We're also trying to connect more with COICA. I actually live in Quito, and we've been working together for a while with the indigenous organizations at a national level, at a local level, but also now at the Amazon basin level. I think this is very important, and it's also possible because of the connections being made in this platform. At the same time, we have Pope Francis speaking very, very boldly about this need to come together and respond to the urgencies of the reality. He said that we need to really silence ourselves and listen to what the indigenous peoples have to say. We as Catholic Church, we need to ask for forgiveness for the sins and the crimes committed in the colonial endeavor. And I think this is important to say, but also purify the intention and come close and really make a journey together in this sense. Laudato Si is encyclical. I say always this, it has nothing new, but it makes everything new. It has nothing new because it's connecting the dots that were already there. For the indigenous communities, it's been there for centuries. For scientists, it's been there for decades. But it's just bringing a new light and a new possibility to connect the dots. I just want to say some points which I think are very important about Laudato Si. The scientific accuracy, which is new for the Catholic Church, really bringing the scientific voice.
Remember, we were asking for concrete steps now.
Yes. So the political pertinence of that, which is connected with this initiative, and with the Synod, which is implementing Laudato Si in the Amazon region, we're planning for territorial assemblies, which we want to connect with also the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, as to convey all of the voices and bring new light for our reform, first of all, in this case, for the Synod of the Catholic Church, which we hope it may happen, but also to bring new voices in this interfaith dialogue. We will also be holding some thematic dialogues with the indigenous communities and international events. We're actually planning for a common event at Georgetown University and another at the Vatican to bring the scientific and political voices and also the theological voices for this reflection on the Synod.
Thank you. Thank you. Fletcher.
I could say a few things. In each of the 5 countries where the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative will be working, we'll follow a process. First, we know that education and training is vital for religious leaders. And so we'll be planning a process and a course of training to talk about, first of all, what is the science telling us? Religious leaders very often don't have that kind of background in education. If they don't, it inhibits them from speaking publicly about these issues because they're concerned that they don't know what they're speaking about. So there's a scientific dimension, there's a theological and moral education dimension to help religious leaders find language from within their traditions that enables them to speak genuinely about these issues. There's a dialogue that we'll be opening with indigenous leaders in each of these countries, and that's already underway, so that this partnership from the start is exactly that, is a partnership. There's a political contextual analysis that we need to do so that we know in Brazil, as Pastor Arivaldo was saying, where are the particular leverage points where religious leaders can step in and can make a difference. So we'll be undertaking this process of education and training for religious leaders and analysis, and then it's time to go into action and to identify advocacy priorities, mobilization priorities, places where shareholder advocacy can make a difference, places where partnerships specifically with indigenous leaders. So I think that's the pattern that we'll be following, and gathering a community of advisors in each of these communities made up of scientific leaders, NGO leaders, faith leaders, indigenous leaders, so that there is a collective, wise body that can advise and develop a strategy that's specific to the needs and opportunities and challenges in each of the countries where we'll be working.
Thank you. Charles, would you follow up with some concrete examples?
I think as Fletcher has mentioned, recently we've been to Peru, Colombia, and Brazil, meeting with the religious leaders of all the faiths, exploring their interest, their commitment to engaging, and we've been just amazed at the openness to these issues. And then we've met with the government, the NGOs, indigenous peoples, and learned that this expression of commitment was very welcome. So in those 3 countries, it's clear there's room to take off, and as Fletcher said, we'll have staff in each of these countries based in the interfaith community, linking to the already active multi-sectoral coalition of governments and NGOs and indigenous peoples. So this new force, this new constituency will be brought to bear. We will now soon go to Indonesia and Democratic Republic of Congo to do the same thing. So these 5 countries, which you may say only 5 countries out of 195 countries that we in the UN pay attention to, well, these 5 countries make up something like 80% of all the remaining tropical forests. So with activities in 5 countries, you can impact 80% of the remaining tropical forests. And we all know you can't solve the climate problem without protecting those forests. And we know we can't solve the forest problem without empowering indigenous peoples.
Josien, could I ask you about what you see as concrete steps for the women and children in this perspective we're talking about now, the interfaith and cooperation with the indigenous people? What is how do you deliver on the women and children challenge?
Well, from COICA, I talk about from COICA that we have to know, we elect the secretariat to maintain all of these issues, because we need to be together, men, women, and we have to continue all of this issue, bring back all of the lost one, and that we think we are losing all of this, bring it back like women. That is why we act like the Congress, 50-50 men, women, that we have to be together, work together, because we need in our communities, we are together, we are not separate. We are doing things together like traditional people. And in this case, say man, woman, and the youth. Youth is also part of this institution for the Amazon Basin, and bring all of this to strengthen our way of life, like indigenous people of the Amazon Basin. That is one step that we have to do with all the cooperation that want to help also, because to help, to protect the forests, we have to protect the leaders, that the ancestors, because from them we have to learn and keep doing all of this work. And that is what we conclude in this Congress in Macapá, Brazil. We do this because there is the heart of the Amazon. And I think in the future that we can build a better way of life of indigenous people from all the 9 countries, because COICA is make the 9 countries, and that we can strengthen our way of life, not only for the indigenous people, but in general, the world.
Very good. Thank you so much.
The multi-phase collaboration I mentioned in Indonesia is there, and it's working on the ground. At least can bring all religious councils into collaboration. And also we encourage the functional system within each religious council to have their own committee. Though the activities is still not yet collaborative in the sense of that we are working together, but each religious communities has been working within their own, like for the eco house of worship. But certainly this collaboration has also, attract the government to maybe make use us, if not to support us, in order, even for the legislation change, in order to make our law in line with the environmental conservation. But most important is we are going to start by instilling religious values within our, school curricula. Maybe not as a curricula, but as, a subject or maybe content in our education, which is the education, environmental value-based education. I think in the next few years, we may see the result on the ground.
Very good. I think Einar Kjelde got a lot of good response to his question. And at this point, I would like to recognize a representative again of the United Nations. The UN is a very flexible organization. They are able to participate in several panels in one session. And we are very, very happy that you have joined us, Vicky Tauli-Korpus, UN Special Rapporteur on the rights of indigenous peoples. We are very happy that you could join the panel now. And I would like you to share with us, in your capacity as Special Rapporteur on the rights of indigenous peoples, how do you think religions can advance the aspirations and address the challenges of indigenous people? How can we be in it together?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me in your panel. I just came from another one where I will have to run to afterwards. Just to say that, well, I think that the situation that I have seen in my capacity as the UN Special Rapporteur is that there are a lot of indigenous peoples who are now subjected to the worst kinds of impunity, as well as criminalization, where they're when they are resisting or they are protecting their lands and their forests and asserting their rights, they are subjected to cases filed by the courts against them, which are all many of these are trumped up, and they end up being in jail. And these are very key leaders of the indigenous movements in different parts of the world. I just came from Guatemala, where the indigenous peoples there are 65% of the population, but they have no power. There are only 5 members of parliament who are indigenous out of 159. And the poorest, the rate of malnutrition and poverty is very high. It's even higher than Haiti. And of course, the indigenous peoples are the ones who are suffering from this. So I think that while we are here talking about the forest, we should also be reminded that many of these people who are protecting their forests and trying to make their forests more sustainable are doing what they can at the expense of life and limb. And scientific studies that have been done show that in areas where indigenous people's rights are respected, at least recognized or respected, that's where more vibrant and robust forests are found. So I think that what we can ask the religious community to do is, number one, to really ensure that the fight of indigenous peoples for their rights will be strongly supported. You know, if there are cases of people being killed and criminalized, I hope the churches speak out, because you're always the voice that makes, that gives a lot of influence. Even in the case, for instance, in my case, when I was included in a list of so-called terrorists in my country, the churches have spoken up. The National Council of Churches, the bishops, several bishops spoke up, and that helped because we are a very Catholic and a very Christian country. So that's first. The second thing is, of course, for you to work with indigenous peoples in amplifying the values that we all hold in common. You know, the values of reciprocity, of caring for the earth, all these values that are captured in Laudato Si, for instance. I believe that that encyclical really contains a lot of what indigenous peoples believe in the values that they are living by. And if that material, that document can really be popularized even more, that will be helpful, because even in the Philippines, it's not just the Catholics who are using it, it's also the other Christian denominations and even environmentalists themselves. So I would certainly like this body to look into the awareness raising that's needed for people to understand this. You know, I always go back to the situation in the Philippines when we were under dictatorship, and that the Vatican statement on all this liberation theology was really the theology that mobilized masses of people to fight against dictatorship. So I'm hoping that in this era where the environment, the climate change is really a big problem, the church can play that role again. And if that's going to happen, indigenous peoples will certainly be working along with you. And of course, I think that even if indigenous peoples are not, some of them are not Christians in their own traditional religions, I mean, these values are also resonating with them. So I hope you'll be able to also work with indigenous peoples who want to continue practicing their own spirituality and their own indigenous religion. So those are just a few things that I would like to say. And I'd like to end by saying that, and maybe next year, early next year, I want to organize a meeting on criminalization of indigenous peoples and the impunity against them, because I see this as one of the key issues, and I hope I will be able to work with the churches on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You have rightly underscored the importance of the confluence of the concerns that you and we share, also the cooperation that we need, the coordination of the various initiatives, both within the United Nations and in the broader context of civil society. So thank you for coming and sharing with us, and all blessings for your important work.
Apologies for having to run.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vicky. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
we are coming close to the conclusion of this session. I'm quite sure that many of you have sent in questions which we have not been able to address, but the dialogue will continue most certainly. In closing this session, let me just mention a few observations. The reference to Laudato Si, the encyclica of Pope Francis, which together with similar statements from other religious traditions made a difference in Paris when the accord was signed. Integral ecology, ecology which is internalized, integrated into society and into our moral and spiritual activities. We have underscored the importance of engaging religious actors for the rainforest. Mobilization of religious role would strengthen the global climate campaign and speed progress. I think that's one of the takeaways from this. But also the language of faith. There were two old Norwegians talking together about the problems of this world, and one said, "There will never be peace in the world before we all speak the same language." And the other said, "How are we going to teach them all Norwegian?" When we speak the language of faith, even if we have a different vocabulary, we are on the same wavelength when we speak about love, forgiveness, justice, peace, reconciliation. In the Abrahamic traditions, love of God, love of your neighbor, love of yourself. In many of the other traditions, do to others what you want others to do to you. These are some of the fundamental expressions of spirituality, of moral force, and they may inspire new groups to join together in this very important challenge that is before us, the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative. And let me conclude by thanking those who have made this session possible. Without the very strong and very wise, very flexible approach of Charles and his team, and without the cooperation of the people here in Oslo, we would not have been able to focus, as we have been trying to do, on the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative. I believe that this has been worth the investment, and I do hope that we will continue this dialogue, but even more importantly, not only dialogue, but dia praxis. It is in action, faith in action, that we will see the results in the Rainforest Initiative context. So thank you all for your contribution. We give a great hand to the panel.